my buddy was supposed to date Carrie, and I was supposed to date Carrie's friend.
I told her all the time she needed to date Phil because he was a good guy and that he was hot.
So anyway, I lived in Tulsa and started coming to Oklahoma City to work, and Carrie was the only person I knew in Oklahoma City. So I called her up and to go to dinner, and we started going to dinner and then talking about ex-girlfriends and boyfriends, and then we started dating.
I got up early and peed on the stick, and I thought Phil would be like, hear the toilet flush and just jump out of bed and be like, what'd you find out? And instead he was just snoring. He was just snoring in there, so I had to go in there and wake him up, and I said, we're pregnant, and he was in shock and couldn't believe me. I think my first memory, like the first time I ever thought anything about natural birth was sometime all the way back in high school, but before I ever thought about having kids, I had heard or read something that talked about when you have an epidural and you're saved from the feelings of pain, but you miss out on the feelings of elation that come along with the natural childbirth. So that stuck with me. I don't know where it came from, but it's like I remember that. And I remember thinking back then that I want those things. I want to feel that natural high that you only feel in childbirth. When I scheduled our first appointment, I first called a doctor that a friend had used and that they liked, and he wasn't going to be able to see us until after Thanksgiving, which we wanted to tell our families about the pregnancy over Thanksgiving. So I'm not sure if I just came across it on the website, but I found the nurse midwives at OU and called them to see about scheduling an appointment, and they were going to be able to get me in a week ahead of time. It was going to be perfect timing for us to be able to tell our families. We wanted to, just make sure everything was good before we shared the news. I remember it was probably our first appointment that I asked her, so when will I know for making my birth plan, when will I know if I'll be able to have my baby naturally or if we have to do a C-section? And so now looking back, I think she probably was like, you crazy girl. And she just was really nice in her reply and said, women make the babies that they're made to have, and unless one of us was extremely taller than the other, if we had some extremely different physical makeup, then that may have been a factor. But I said, oh, okay, because I've had so many friends that early in their pregnancy are told their babies are too big or going to be too big and that they'll have to have a C-section. So just from hearing what other people had heard from their doctors, that's what I assumed for myself too. And so I went into my first appointment thinking, oh, when will we know if my body's built, if my hips are wide enough to have a baby? When I look at different pages where people go for advice, everyone says hire a doula, hire a doula. So I don't know if I ran into that. Or maybe I was just intrigued by having someone, an actual human with me to help me through the labor, because I knew that he didn't, he's never done it before either. So we were both not having any idea what we were going to get into. And I mean, we were looking at childbirth classes too, but we kind of waited around too long because some of the classes we looked at are several weeks long, and midway through the pregnancy, if the class isn't offered until next month and then it's a 12-week class or something, then kind of ran into a time crunch. And so eventually we just decided, rather than spending money on a class, we'll spend the money on the doula and have somebody there with us that knows what's normal and can help us through. And we felt like that would give us peace of mind.
We met with 5 different doulas, and got to know their personalities and made sure they'd click with our families, because we knew it was going to be, or it could be, pretty stressful.
And then we learned from all of them too. Like, they were really, just meeting with them was an educational tool. Just doing the interviews, because we would take away little things, just in conversation that I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, and even if you sit through a class, you're you're not having any sleep and whatever, you're not gonna know. You're not gonna remember what to do.
Yeah, I would think that you'd forget some of it.
I felt like she knew what she was doing, and
like everything was in control. Even when they asked us if we could break my water or if we should start Pitocin, we always felt like we were in control. And having the doula there as a sounding board was extra assurance for me. Even though I trusted my midwife, I had a third opinion.
It wasn't like you see on TV, like the crazy screaming. I mean, not saying there wasn't any stress involved at all. It was a lot. It was 10 times better than what I expected. So
it was a lot of work.
Maybe TV didn't show that much work.
Yeah, maybe TV didn't show how much work actually goes into it.
Yeah. And the guy just sits back and really doesn't do much.
I never got to the point where I felt like I can't do it and give me the drugs. Like, that never, even after 20 hours of labor, I was still, even though I was exhausted and I didn't know what we could do to keep things progressing, I never reached a point where I felt like I couldn't do it. Saturday morning, woke up and everything was fine. I had made plans to go to a health fair that day and do some other errands, and we had sex that morning. That's kind of what kick-started it. So shortly after that, and I mean very shortly, I think I expected if that was to kick off labor, it would have, I don't know, like an hour later, but this was like 20 minutes later. I just had some discomfort, and then I was trying to get ready for the day and get my hair and makeup done, and I was having to stop because I was that uncomfortable. I didn't know it was contractions, really. I just didn't feel great. So I asked Phil to bring in the birthing ball, which I didn't know exactly. Well, I think by that time it was starting to register, so he brought it to the bedroom, and I sat down on the ball and kind of rocked around next to the bed. Just had my head like my head was down on the bed. And I think we started timing contractions with our phone app then. I don't know how long that went on. It didn't seem like very long, but I think it was, 30 minutes, which isn't incredibly long, but we called the doula just to tell her that something was definitely different that morning. And talked to her on the phone, and she said, sounds like you're probably in labor, but let me know if you decide to go to the hospital, and I'll meet you there, or if you want me to come to your house, I can do that. So I think you probably I don't think you realized how serious I was at first, because I told Phil to turn off the Sensies and take the stuff to the car. I remember saying that, and he was like, oh, right now? Then we got to the hospital, and they checked me, and Dawn said my contractions were actually a lot closer together than we had even realized. So by that time, and the Monday before my due date, I was dilated to a 4 and a face like somewhere around 70%. So 5 days before my due date, I was already halfway through labor. Like the early part of labor, I had practically skipped, so I never even felt any of that. So it was kind of the active labor that finally set us off to get to the hospital. So we were admitted. They gave me an IV because I had group B strep. So they started vancomycin, which I'm allergic to penicillin, so that was the option that I got, and probably within about 5 or 10 minutes of the IV, I started itching all over. I had an allergic reaction to it. And I turned bright red, beet red, and my scalp was itching like crazy. And I just asked Phil to dry shampoo my hair all over my head. So that was just to try to keep me from scratching my skin off. But it was all over my stomach and my back. And then, so that was fun. That sucked really bad.
They stopped that.
They cut it short?
Yeah.
Oh, so I didn't even finish. You guys got cold rags for me and stuff. And then the doula was trying to help my labor progress, which they said I was progressing great to begin with, but she massaged my legs and we would go for walks. We went for one walk and I don't know, I was fine. I was dilated to an 8 and the people at the labor and delivery desk were like, we never see first time moms dilated to an 8, just stop walking around. So I was talking and I didn't even feel like I was in labor. I kind of felt like maybe it was a false alarm, and I almost felt bad because I was like, I don't really feel anything. And everybody says I'm in labor, but.
And I thought, this is going to be a breeze.
So that was late in the afternoon. We probably got admitted between noon and 1. And so by 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock that night, the family had started rolling in from out of town, and we took another walk and we added squats in, and the doula she told us that she was like, I've never been this far away from the birth suite, you know, this far along. So she was pretty worried that my water might break and we would be way out on the skywalk somewhere and have to get a wheelchair. And so we joked about that. Then we got back to the room and my monitor showed I was having contractions a minute and a half apart for a while. And then, I don't know what slowed it down, but they slowed down to like 7 minutes apart. And so she asked about breaking my water, and I said to wait another 30 minutes or something. So like, at 9 o'clock, she broke my water.
Yeah, you start going into heavier labor, and I don't know, I just remember I had her sit on the toilet couple times, moving back and forth between the toilet and the bed, and tried all different positions, and she was pushing really hard.
Around 2, she brought up Pitocin, and I was scared to death because everything I'd read about all the natural labor stories that I had read to pump myself up, I was pretty scared of the Pitocin because up until that point I felt like I'd handled the pain fine, but I was afraid that the Pitocin would be too intense and I wouldn't be able to hang with that. And I didn't want this cascade of interventions that I had read about. I didn't want that to happen. So I asked them to give me a little more time, and they did. And that's part of why I always felt in control for the birthing experience, like, because they didn't push it on me. They just suggested it and let me decide. They gave me the time I needed to feel comfortable with it. So, yeah, they started the Pitocin. Oh, and I did ask for the smallest. I asked for the lowest dose of Pitocin. And I don't know where I got that idea, but I'm glad that that came to mind, because patients probably don't. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing that most people don't think about having control over how much you get. And Dawn agreed to that. They started the Pitocin and started kicking my contractions in. They were coming closer together just like we needed them to be. And it wasn't too hard for me to handle. Yeah, we pushed in every stinking position, and I had been doing workouts all through the pregnancy, lots of squats, doing bar classes, and thought I should be pretty prepared, but I was still, during labor, when you're pushing with all your might and you're squatting, it's an intense workout. So the day after, I mean, I didn't feel that sore from having the baby so much, but my body, I could tell, I just worked it over. So we had worked, pushed in every position possible, and Dawn asked me if I wanted to feel the head, and we didn't know if we were having a girl or a boy still. So I did reach down and feel the head, and that was pretty motivating. Like, at least I knew that I had gotten him down that far. At least that was kind of a feeling of a reward for the work I'd been doing all night. So there his head was, and then not long after that, she asked me again, and I just said, I just remember like shaking my head no. My eyes were closed the whole time, so I just feel like I was zoned out, but I didn't want to feel it the second time just because I felt like I was in such a zone. And I don't know, it motivated me the first time. I don't know why it wouldn't have motivated me more the second time, but I was like, nope, I was just focused on the pushing part. I felt like we were on a roll and I just wanted to get the job done. And then Dawn put him on my stomach, and I didn't see if it was a boy or a girl. I think I was just so exhausted. But she laid him on me for a minute, and then she said, did you see what you got? And we tried to hold him up, but he was so slippery and wet, and we were, you know, unsure of how to hold him. And so she grabbed him from behind and held him up in front of us, and I said, it's a boy! And I tried to say it really loud so that my family across the hall could hear, because I knew they'd been waiting all night for that moment, and I didn't want them to have to wait a lot longer to hear it from the doctor, so I just yelled it pretty loud. I forgot that I cut the cord. I had told our midwife that Phil wasn't interested in that, so not to even ask him. But I didn't put in there that I wanted to do it, but when it came time, she just asked me, and I was like, heck yeah.
Scissors.
Yeah, she just like held the scissors up, and I was like, okay, if I just delivered him, I can do this. So I cut his cord.
I just realized how tough she was. And
so the next morning when we got in the room, I was kind of out of it. I wish I could remember that moment, but he said, babe, you're amazing, you're strong. He listed off all this stuff, and I was like, what? I should have soaked that moment in more, but I forgot some of the words that he said, but he was just like in awe.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe what he just seen.
Yeah, and I won't lie, I was pretty emotional after Callum was born.
Because I think as a first-time mom, when you don't know what to expect, if you're considering natural childbirth, then you need to know that it's possible, and you need to know that there's good stories and there's pleasant stories, and it's not all pain and hell. It's a good experience, even though you're in some pain. Your body adapts to make you be able to cope with the pain that comes. And so if you're thrown into labor with Pitocin, your contractions might be unbearable, but if your body is ready, then your body's going to help you cope. And that's what I had to fill my mind with before our birth, and I just had to read a lot of like Ina May Gaskin, the testimonies in her books and some other books, but I just read all the time, and I would just read those positive stories and those positive experiences, and affirmations, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos of home water births. I just reinforced my mind with the good stories. Mm-hmm. And so if I can share my story and somebody else can gain confidence from that, then I want people to be empowered by it. I focused really hard on preparing, for pregnancy, and then for preparing for birth, and then we got home with the baby, and I felt very unprepared for breastfeeding, even though I took some classes and I read a little bit on breastfeeding, so I felt somewhat educated and prepared, but when it came time, I was so not prepared, because some of the classes I took, I loved the lady, I loved her passion that taught it, but she chose to kind of not address the things that can go wrong with breastfeeding because she didn't want to scare anyone from trying it. So I understand that. But when I ran into those roadblocks, I didn't know why or how to deal with them. So when we got home with the baby, it was kind of like breastfeeding and then caring for the baby. We were like, you know, and then it was too late to be reading books.
It's amazing how many people will try to talk you out of breastfeeding, and
or natural childbirth or cloth diapering. There's a lot of naysayers that are like, ha ha ha, that's funny, good luck. And we've done it all and enjoyed it, and we love the choices we've made.
Breastfeeding wasn't the easiest thing on her at first, but she just stuck with it. Talking with coworkers and friends, they're like, oh no, that's crazy, and it's not crazy, it's
natural.
You have the peace of mind knowing that the natural processes are taking place, and him or her's gonna come out when they're supposed to after those natural processes have happened.
There was a lady that's known me since I was born, but I haven't seen her in decades probably, and it turns out she lives not very far from us, and she brought me a nipple shield, which some people frown on, but that's what got me through. And if I hadn't had that, then, I mean, I don't think I would have turned to formula, but I would have really just like, I was really tempted to just start pumping exclusively for a little while just to give myself time to heal up. But she brought me the nipple shield, and I used it for not even 24 hours. And it helped me so much just to be able to regain my sanity. And I was kind of scared that I would use it as a crutch and be afraid to feed him without it on. But the next evening, I felt confident enough to try it again, and I did, and he latched better, and I felt great. So if anybody ever needs a nipple shield, do not think that it's the devil, because it got me through like the hardest part. And she said, I mean, she saw my Facebook post, and she said, we'll be there, we're eating dinner, and we'll be at your house in 30 minutes. And they went to a CVS on the way and brought it to me. And then she was probably at the house for an hour or two just helping me. So that was the traumatic part for me, not birth, but just getting through the rough patches in breastfeeding. But and then I've had a lot of moms have reached out to me and like sent me private messages on Facebook where they've told me about their trials. So it's not something that they shared with the world like I did, but I know that people identify with me because they tell me so. And then even since then, there are other moms that I've been outspoken with things on Facebook, and even though they're not, they've contacted me for advice. So that makes me feel like when I share my life with the world, there's a reason for it, because people need help with different things, and they know that I've studied it or researched a lot.
No, so it was nice to have a peace of mind that if I needed help, that was there.
But I would consider a home birth or a birthing center, just because part of me wonders if I hadn't had the antibiotic and I hadn't had the allergic reaction, would my labor had not stalled out and slowed down like it did? Because I was progressing so fast at home and then so fast at the hospital even after that. But part of me wonders that now, looking back, that maybe things could have gone a lot faster than the 20 hours we had. So you hear things like half the battle's in your mind. And I just feel like if you want a natural birth, then you need to have your mind set on it and be committed to it. And the same thing with breastfeeding. I had a discussion with a lactation consultant while I was pregnant, and she said, how committed are you to breastfeeding? And I said, I'm pretty committed. And she said, how committed. And so just the fact that she pressed me a little bit more, I said, I'm 90 to 100% committed. So I committed in that moment, a high commitment to breastfeeding. And I don't know if that's where it started, but when it got rough, I was still dead set on it mentally. Like I still wasn't, even though I didn't know how I was going to do it. And every time he would wake up crying and I knew he was hungry, I would get major anxiety, and I felt awful because it took everything out of me to be able to latch him on. But I was set on it, and we got through it. And I feel like part of it was just because my mind was made up that there were no other options. So I just want to stress how much your mental dedication and commitment, how far that can take you. Well, I put it in terms like you see The Biggest Loser and you see those people work so hard and meet their goal, and it's this success story, but that's kind of like how I felt. Like I felt like I was in some crazy boot camp, and finally by the time he's 2 months old, I finally felt like I had graduated, and I felt like we are over, like we have climbed the mountain and it's downhill from here. So my goal was to breastfeed for a year, and once we got to 3 months and it was, I was a pro at it by then, now I know that I'll go past a year, because now I'm in love with it, and I'm so proud of that I know that we'll breastfeed past the norm of 1 year, and I know people are gonna talk about that too. That's fine. It was a quick response.
How funny.
Isn't that what the pregnancy tests are called? Quick response?
First response.
Don't know what to think.
Do you care what nurse am?
No.
Okay.
It's natural birth. I just heard
Well,
the audience won't mind.
Hey!
Their doulas and midwives are professionals that've done it before, so it's not like it's just somebody off the street.
Too big.
100% breast milk